Right. Let's check real quick and make sure that you've got a good full body view. Okay, perfect. So we're gonna do a little warm up this morning. I said experiment. It's mostly within the mind to experimenting with how this lands in your body, right? So I have a very long TheraBand here. It's the longest one I have, which I really like. TheraBands tend to come pre-cut in shorter lengths than this. So if yours is not quite this long, you'll have to hold closer to the ends of it for this exercise. Will be the best here. So make a sling with it and then have it right under the arches of your feet. Oh goodness. My nose has been fine all morning, and then just in time for class, it decided to get sniffly. My apologies. All right, I'm gonna blow my nose one more time. Oh, so annoying. Only because it's not going to be any fun going upside down with this sniffly nose. Okay, so as I was saying, like a sling here. And you want to feel like you've got equal length on in either hand, right? So you can get equal tension on both sides. And then you take a block on its tall, wide setting, which feels a little awkward, I will admit, to put right in between the legs. You put it below the knees and above the ankles on the fleshy part of the calf. And then you just kind of let your feet adjust to a place where you can get some pressure into it. You might adjust it up or down a little bit to feel like your legs are kind of resting evenly into it, and then find your weight in the center of the foot, right? And then you start standing up nice and tall here. And with this tension on the TheraBand, you want about 30% effort. So you're holding in a place where when you let go of the tension in the arms, the TheraBand pulls the arms down along the sides a little bit. So you get some release and lengthening in the shoulders right away here. And the truth of the matter is, we don't naturally land in a neutral pelvis, neutral spine. We land in whatever our spinal relationships are with ribs and hips and shoulders and all that jazz and head. So we're going to soften the knees a little bit to start and just notice right away here how much more ease and play come into the hips when we have a gentle bend in the knees, right? And then you can kind of steer the hips side to side. The low back probably softens up. You can rock your hips front to back. You can swish them side to side. You do a little circling here, and you have a pretty easy range of motion. And there's not a lot of tensioning on the upper spine, like I said. So with that soft bend in the knees now, you're just gonna drape the upper body forward. It's a slow roll down. Head rolls down. Jesus. Chin to chest. Rounding down through the spine. Hang forward over the hips. Right? And then you just drape the arms here. Take an inhale at the bottom. And so you want to breathe wide into the ribs and the low back. And then as you exhale, soften the knees. And roll up. Get lots of feedback on the way up. So what you want to notice as you roll up and you restack the spine is if there's some fishtailing there as you extend the legs. If you're kind of winding your way up through the spine, or if you're able to stay really vertically on your axis. And I deliberately left an important cue out so you could just experience where your range of motion is on the way up without the extra cue. And now we'll add it in for contrast. So this is the experiment, right? Just to really kind of observe how we're moving and how things change when we add another element of intention. So starting right here at the top, take an inhale, just let the TheraBand gently pull the shoulders down the back, and then feel the head kind of floating upwards away from the shoulders and the tailbone reaching down, so that sling feeling goes through the whole body, right? And then from here, you're gonna soften the knees. And with that, you're just gonna keep the pelvis in neutral as much as possible. Nod the chin into the chest. Round the shoulders forward. And now you can adjust where your hips are as you drop down and in and find this forward fold. You wanna bend. This is an interesting thing. People are sometimes reluctant to do this. Really bend your knees enough so that your ribs can rest on your thighs like a shelf, which will allow you to decompress the shoulders and hang the head forward. And take a nice big inhale down here. This is a really important transition. Exhale without starting to move up. Once you feel the abs start to turn on at the base of the exhale, begin to roll up slowly without using any leverage from the back. It's all abs. Just let the back kind of stack as the abs engage. And so the abs are going to creep up along the length of the spine. And as they do, then you can roll up. Okay. So now I will give you all the cues, because there's one more that I left out, because you had to work through the ab engagement. Now we're going to add all of that. So hang out in this sling here for a moment. Enjoy the shoulders drawing down the back, reaching up through the crown of the head. And exhale. You're going to soften the knees. Try to keep the pelvis in neutral for this first part. Then as you nod the chin into the chest, the hips are going to counterbalance as you round forward. Roll down through the spine. Hang forward. Bend the knees enough that you land on the thighs, and take a nice deep inhale down here. Exhale. Soften the back as you engage the abs. Slowly roll up. And as you do, you're really tracking the knees over the second and third toe, going up slowly so you can feel midline and stay right in the center. So if you're driving, you'd write right down the center line on your bicycle, right? The bicycle tires. You wouldn't be going to the right or the left of it. And then when you finish, gently lengthen the legs, but don't push back into the knees to lock them out or hyperextend. So find that middle ground where your legs are stretched long and you're really lifting up and out of the knee joint, but you're not locking into the back of the knee joint to stand up. And that'll really bring you into the center of the arch of the foot. And then we can release the TheraBand, drop the block with the legs without reaching down for it, and just step out here for a second and stand on our 2 feet. So we'll talk about the importance of what we did there for a minute. Soft bend in the knees, right? Posturally, we tend to lock the knee joints out, right? We tend to hang out in our joints, not just the knees, but also the joints of the hips, the joints of the back, and the ribs. Even if we know locking out the joints isn't good, even if we know we want to use our core to move, and we even have a very significantly developed relationship with the core, we can always hope, right? Our body's going to compensate for tension patterns, whether we intellectually know that's a good idea or not. And then it's going to shift its balance based on the places that are weak and strong when you're locked out in the joints. So if you soften the joints, right, and that can really start with the knee joint, because that's a big nexus point for our standing posture. Then rock to the inside of the foot so you feel your weight really on the big toe and on the inner arch. This sort of movement exploration might trigger some pain patterns too. So you might notice, oh, wow, that's sort of the place where I hang out and it's a little painful. So be aware of those things as we go through too. So rock to the inside of the arch, and then rock through the center of the foot, to the outside of the arch on the pinky toe. And I want you to notice, we're orienting in terms of the foot, but notice how it tracks all the way up to the head of the femur where it lands in the hip. Rock to the inside of the arch. So you'll feel kind of knock-kneed and collapsed in the arch, and then rock to the outside of the foot. And notice how that changes across the hips. So one of the things that happens when we lock our knees is that we lose communication from the foot to the hip. But we really want an open line of communication because there's a lot of counterbalancing that happens and a lot of alignment that we want in communication from the foot to the hip. The best way to do that is to not be locked out in the joints, either the hips or the knees, and to orient yourself right in between the second and third toe joint. And that will bring you into the midfoot, right? So find that orientation. You're not on the pinky toe side and you're not on the big toe side. You're really right in that second and third toe joint. You can rock to the front of the foot and the back of the foot. So you're neither in the ball of the foot or the heel. You're right in the center of the arch. And when you do that, you should have your knees, as you bend them, go right over the middle toes, not winging out to the side or falling in. And we're not doing a big bend in the knees. This seems really micro, right? In terms of athleticism, in terms of the intensity of our workout. This is very tiny kind of adjustments, and it seems like super specifically focused. Second and third toe joint, right? But that is how you orient the entire lower limbs in alignment so that they can maintain communication with each other. And then if you lock the joints out, just experiment with it, you're going to land in your tension pattern. Probably one hip's higher than the other, maybe you have some pelvic rotation. And now it may be harder to feel where you're standing on the foot. And you probably landed in more of your favorite spot, either back or forward or on the inside of the foot or the out, or some combination of. So bring a micro bend into the knees, orient towards the second and third toe joint again. And then before you stretch your legs to a true straight, which is not hyperextended, but lifted out of the knee joint. So really up, not back, right? Take an inhale, still soft bend in the knees here, still second and third toe joint oriented. Then exhale, find a little lift in your pelvic floor and the low abdominals, just like we did in the roll down with the TheraBand and the block. And then continue that lift upwards with the abs along the length of the spine. And let that lift you out of the knees, and try to do it equally. So the right and left knee lift upwards, but don't press back. Keep your orientation in the second and third toe joint. Feel how that lands the femurs in a true neutral position in the hips, and the attachments all orient there, and how that really softens where you are in the ribs and shoulders and chest. And that's your upright posture, right? What do they teach in school these days? So we'll just release all of that. But that is the value of that roll down exercise with the support of the blocks and the TheraBand, is you can start to feel with the outside structure with the block and the TheraBand kind of where you're moving from. And if you wait at the bottom of the roll down to exhale and really get the abs online, and then let the abs move up the spine and move the spine upwards as you roll up, rather than leveraging from the back, you will have a major transition. So that's the goal there. We can come down onto the floor now. And we're going to take our blocks just off to the side, and we're going to take our towel off to the side, and we're going to come down to the back With the knees bent. Good. From here, we're going to take constructive rest. So we did some nice work articulating through the spine already today. And now we're just going to take a moment here and establish that midline on our back and check in with neutral pelvis, right? So knees drop together to touch, feet are nice and wide. This is this constructive rest posture. And then try to feel your hip bones directly across from each other. And you can make this little triangle here with the thumbs underneath the belly button, thumbs together, pointer finger together, make a little diamond or triangle, thumbs under the belly button, heels of the hands on the hips, hip bones, and then fingertips to the pubic bone. And then see if you can find your true neutral here. And it might feel a little different in the back side of the body than it does usually if you found any release in the tracking work that we just did. You might feel a little bit more aligned and a little bit more even and a little bit softer in the muscles of the back if you were able to get them to turn off at all. One more thing we're going to do as an experiment here is take this towel roll. I keep using the word experiment this morning. Apparently, I'm feeling scientific about movement today. But take this towel roll. You can unroll it as much as you need to, right at the base of the skull, right? So there's a thing called the occipital ridge where the base of the skull comes into the neck, and it's a little bony protrusion in the back. You kind of want to prop that up underneath the towel. So the cervical spine, or the neck, that's what we call the cervical spine, is able to float free. And the chin is supported and kind of nodding into the chest. And notice if your ribs are able to soften a little bit more into the ground and feel a little bit heavier with this head support. This is very variable because we all have different angles at which we hold our head. However, it is not entirely universal, but we would say 90% of the population at least has some forward head movement in their standing and sitting posture. And that makes resting easily with the head and ribs in alignment very challenging, just laying flat on your back. Even if you can lay down, there might be some unconscious tension that you don't really necessarily identify as like rib tension or neck or shoulder tension. When you put this towel roll underneath you, so just so the head's supported, right? Get that Goldilocks level where it feels really good. Then you get some drop and release in the ribs. And then when you have neutral pelvis, and then you get neutral ribs on top of the pelvis, which the ribs get nice and grounded and soft, which is helped by this. And Susan will appreciate this because if you use the headrest on the reformer, this towel is mimicking that in the lying down posture, right? If you don't ever have your headrest propped up, you may still be having rib tension that you're unaware of. So if you feel softer through the shoulders and ribs here, this is an indication that a little elevation of the head is going to be helpful for you when you're laying on your back in terms of being grounded. And you'll have so much more access to your core because your ribs aren't in hyperflexion, right? You know, even a little bit gets in the way of actually finding some engagement. So the interesting thing about Pilates and our spinal alignment is that we actually need super soft and released ribs and super soft and grounded hips and low back in order to actually access the deep, fine muscles of core control, right? So otherwise, if we don't have those big areas released, hips, lumbar spine, ribs, then we end up leveraging from them and probably kind of unevenly because we don't usually have tension even in those places when they are tense. So with that in mind, we're just going to take 3 nice deep breaths here in constructive rest, and hopefully you kind of figured out your sweet spot. Close your eyes. Take a nice deep breath in through the nose for 5 counts. And exhale out through the nose for 5 counts. Wait for it as you're exhaling out to feel that place where the abs soften inward enough that you can feel a natural upsweep. And then see if you can just keep relaxing those muscles up and in, intentionally drawing the low abdominal connection along the sides of the waist and up and under the ribs, and continuing to soften the front space of the ribs on top of it. And notice as you kind of grab a hold, as you connect in to those, make sure that you're not grabbing on one side and pulling up more and making the hips or the ribs uneven, right? This is just interestingly very much like the roll up we did with the TheraBand and the block. Got midline engaged, and then we're using the breath to do that upsweep of the abdominals here. And it's just like a roll up, only the posture is static and we're just using the abs. We'll do one more full deep breath here. Exhale, soften the abs down and in. See if you can let them descend all the way to the bottom point. And then there's a place where they start to connect in, and then you allow the upward lift to happen. And then relax the ribs closed on top once they get up into the diaphragm area. Good. So that's your Pilates scoop. And it's a lot more passively, it has passive origins versus active. So you have to soften into center. You have to have the hips released and the ribs released in order to do that scoop. And this is the beautiful synergy between yoga and Pilates, because the yoga teaches us how to release. And he really focuses on the release work of the breath. And the Pilates teaches us how to activate within the release. They need to kind of talk to each other. If we're just actively trying to engage all the time, then we're really tensing up on top of all of this stuff. And with those tension patterns, you can't actually access the deeper, subtler muscles. So then you just end up using the big muscles that you always use, mostly in the patterns that you use them. And so it doesn't really transform the muscle patterning the same way that it does when you release first and then find the connectivity. So enough of that. Let's get into some bigger movement. So for now, we can take that towel roll out from underneath us, draw the knees into the chest, and come into a little side to side rock. Hopefully your neck feels a little longer. As a teacher, kind of a weird triumphant moment this last week, right? It's one of those things that kind of seems strange to say, but it's like really the perfect metaphor for what you're trying to achieve. As a teacher, I worked with a student. We did a lot of release work and just a tiny bit of engagement work during class. And then she left and she sent me a text when she got to her car, and she said, I grew over the course of the last hour because I had to adjust my mirror when I got into the car because I'm taller. And that's like the perfect, that's like exactly what you're going for as a teacher. So when you get into the car after your session, you have to adjust your mirror because you've grown. So it is possible to grow as adults, quite a bit actually. There's a lot of unused space in the body, and that's part of what we're exploring here, is how to release into using that unused space. So the whole tension, it kind of clamps us down, right? So we're gonna just come into some bigger movements. As we're rocking side to side here, we're gonna start to go around in a circle. Knees over to the right, away and left, and into center. Keep these circles within range, right? So just as far as the arms can reach. Couple more times around. Just observe as you go around how things are feeling. Good, bad, indifferent. And then reverse. Left, away, right, and center. Left, away, right, and center. Just kind of being easy here as you go around. Easy as it. Good. Last one. And land center. Now, that little spiraling motion, you might have had more movement on one side than the other. So go ahead and set your feet down and reorient your spine. If it helps to drop the knees together to touch, to find that midline, really helps me. It's like true north, right? Then do that. And then we're going to draw the knees into the chest again. I just take my arms out to the sides. Palms can be up or down, either way. Take an inhale here with the knees into the chest. And then exhale. Drop the knees over to the left. And then we're going to sweep the right arm up and overhead. And then soften onto the left side. A little bit of a fetal position. If you want to curl the head into the chest, you can. And then you're going to inhale, reach your right arm up and overhead. And then exhale, come into your rotation. We're just going to do this 2 more times. Inhale, sweep your right arm up and overhead. Exhale, soften onto your side. So you're going slowly enough that you get both parts of the breath for that whole movement. Inhale, reach up and overhead. And just notice how your low spine, your tailbone, is responding to this upper spine movement. Exhale, rotate open. Last one. And this rotate open can really start to use the head. Inhale, reach your right arm up and overhead. And then exhale, soften onto your side. Inhale, reach your right arm up and overhead. And then this time we're going to stay in the twist. Exhale, soften over to the right into your twist. Rolling your head open as much as it feels good to. Not fighting resistance, but releasing into it. And then letting your tailbone drop underneath you. Give yourself a few more nice deep breaths here. One more full deep breath. And then you're going to take your left hand, bend the elbow, bend the palm of the hand like it's holding a tray. And then you're going to lift your right knee up onto the hand and just kickstand it there. When you stretch your left leg out below you. All right. And then see about supporting the right leg and extending out towards straight and maybe circling the ankle. And I say towards straight because this is kind of a zingy range of motion here, right? Lots of us have a tremendous amount of tightness on the outside of the thigh and even down into the calf and ankle because that's where we're holding ourselves up from rather than the core. So circle the ankle in both directions here. Knee can be slightly bent or very bent or not bent at all. Wherever serves you. Keeping the head turned over to the other side if possible. And then we're just going to bend the knees and come onto our back. Letting all that twist go by rocking gently side to side. So hopefully you feel a little softer and not a lot of radiating decompression, but just a softening. That's our goal. If you feel radiating decompression, just means that your alignment hasn't totally adjusted to release yet. And so there's a lot of nerves and stuff in the hips that are talking about how they're not into a neutral alignment yet. Good. All right. So now we're just going to drop the knees on an exhale over to the right. See where you land over here. Similar but different because the sides of the body are really, we use them very differently. So they have different tension patterns, different places where they're strong, weak, soft, tense, right? You can kind of play with turning your head over to the side and see where it lands on the side, how you feel that. And then you're going to inhale, take your left arm up and overhead, and then exhale, soften onto your side, facing the right. And we're just going to breathe through this a couple of times, rinsing out the stretch here through the upper body. Inhale, bring your left arm up and overhead, and then exhale, sweep it open, not being in a rush with this, but really feeling each little fiber as it stretches along the way. So this is helping you bring some attunement into what's going on with this upper body range of motion. Inhale, sweep your arm up and overhead. And then exhale, soften onto your side. And when you're softening onto your side, see if you can let your tailbone decompress and lengthen a little bit. 2 more times. Inhale, reach up and overhead. And exhale, sweep open. Inhale, reach up and overhead. And exhale, soften onto your side. Last one here to land into the twist. Really listening to how the lower body is responding to this upper body movement. Inhale, reach up and overhead. And then exhale, come over onto your side or into your twist, wrapping your head, your chest, your ribs, your shoulders over to the left. Find a place where you can take a couple of nice deep breaths here. Continuing to think about lengthening the tailbone and sits bones down towards the heels. Good. And then you're just going to use that right hand like a kickstand. So you bend the elbow, flex the wrist like you're holding a tray, lift your the top leg up, stretch your right leg down. Find the place where you can wedge that hand underneath you so you can just rest the weight of the leg on the right hand and then work the leg towards straight. And it may really not actually come all the way to straight because, like I said, this outside line of the leg is pretty tense, generally speaking. Through the hip, through the sciatic nerve, all the way down to the calf, outside of the calf, and the pinky toe side of the foot. And we'll really feel that tension pattern and how it's exerting itself as you begin to circle the ankle. So you can keep the soft bend in the knee as you need it, right? I wouldn't even say if you need it, as you need it. And then circle the ankle around. Keep your head turning over to the left as you're able to. And then reverse the circle, opposite way. Equally important range of motion. And then gently come onto your back and do a little side to side rock. Hopefully things feel like they're getting kind of soft and buttery through the ribs, the mid back, and the hips. And again, if you're not feeling that quite yet, let's take the feet down here, mat with distance apart, and drop the knees together to touch. It can very easily be an alignment issue. For most of us, it is. That's tension patterns that are pulling us out of alignment. So take a moment here to really try to establish midline, level out the pelvis. Try to find a true neutral here. And then soften the ribs, the chest, the shoulders into the head, close the eyes. Arms come out wide to the side and take a couple of nice deep breaths here. So we're going to take this sort of spiraling motion of the twist. And even though we've been flowing through that spiral motion with the rinsing of the upper body, now we're really going to take it into some full body movement. So we're going to separate the knees and we're going to drop the knees over to one side and then the other side. So this is the warm up, this windshield wiper. Make it soft though, so we're not pushing our range of motion. We're just kind of letting legs fall and then return and fall to the place where they naturally come into their resistance and then return. So it's a little bit of a perpetual motion machine here. And as you find that, you'll probably feel a little softening in the center of the spine, right at the top of the hips, as we let go of leveraging and just let the legs swing easily and soft in the sockets. So that's our goal. So kind of traveling from the femur heads where they sit in the sockets, have a bunch of muscle attachments onto them that help us lift and lower the legs. They keep us upright in a seated posture, right? They help us walk up and down stairs. All of that movement of lower limbs actually connects the two legs together in the center of the spine. And we kind of feel that with psoas connectivity, right? Which is a big muscle that bends us in half. And what we're doing here is we're softening the psoas into center by just sort of relaxing the knees side to side. Now, we're going to bring it into bigger movement. So the knees are going to fall all the way over to the left. Your right arm's going to sweep up and overhead and carry you onto the left side. And that the top right knee and the elbow are going to come towards each other into a little fetal position. You can actually have them touch if you want to. And then you're going to starfish away from center to come around onto your back. You will feel kind of like a star or an X shape here when you're on your back. And then you're going to exhale, trace an arc with the inside, the big toe of the left leg. Let your left arm come up and overhead as you roll onto your right side and draw your elbow and knee together, chin to chest. Inhale, sweep open. X. Then exhale. Curl. In. Inhale, open. And exhale, curl it. Now you can kind of start moving a little bit more organically. Now both legs move and both arms move as you rock side to side. Hopefully you have enough space around you and your floor is reasonably clean, so you don't feel like you're doing the sweeping, right? Not stirring too much up. But we really do want to stir up the center of the body. You can feel how functional this movement is. Good. And then we're going to come on to the left side one more time. And then come onto our back. And then we'll come onto the right side one more time. And then we'll come onto the back. Beautiful flow exercise that involves the full body and its side to side lateral movement and curvature, right? And limb connection. So now we're going to just roll over onto our left side and stack the joints. And this is your bilateral movement exercise, kind of similar to what we've been doing, but really coming into it from a different point. So we're going to open like a clam or a book. So the whole top side of the body, both limbs are going to open together. So right arm and knee float up together, like the elbow and the knee are connected on strings, and they're just gonna lift to the point where they naturally bring you onto your back, and let the left knee and elbow lift in line with each other as well. And then exhale, soften, just melt over onto the other side. And that melting, closing onto the right side is a really important part of this. This is very soothing for the nervous system because this is a primary range of motion for us. Before we moved cross laterally, opposite arm and leg, we moved bilaterally, same arm and leg. So sort of in utero movements here, growing outward from center. So top elbow and knee move open together to carry you onto your back. Slowly, you're trying to just kind of use the littlest amount of initiation and use momentum to come into this more. So the weight of the body itself than effort. Use 2 more here. Inhale, open the limbs. Soften onto your back. And then exhale. And it's a very balancing quality for the nervous system and for the musculoskeletal system to do this side to side movement. One more time, each side. Inhale to open, like a book or clamshell, whichever one you feel is more relatable, like a butterfly, opening both wings together, right? And then exhale, closing. One more time. Inhale, open. And then we're just gonna stay on our back here. Draw the knees in towards your shoulders, but you keep them wide. So hopefully they're kind of wide here where you landed on your back. And just drop them both in towards the shoulders. So there's room for the ribs in between the thighs. We're gonna check on happy baby pose in this shape, right? So unfold the soles of the feet up to the ceiling. Go ahead and draw the knees, holding onto the back of the knees, in a little bit more. And that might feel like a more intensive stretch that we've done this up to this point. It's a little bit more active. Maybe you can reach up the lower leg and grab hold of the ankle, or possibly the pinky toe. If the pinky toe is out of range, just take note of that. Try not to be judgmental. If you do grab the pinky toe, check in with the outside of the arms and see if they're tense, or the front of the chest and collarbone, trying to get you into this position. See if you can kind of soften it up. And then we're going to let the soles of the feet come together to touch, and then drop the knees open here without any support of blocks underneath us. We're kind of investigating what it's like to do this without support. And then we're going to investigate what it's like to do it with support. Okay. So notice down in your hips, couple of things, how tense the inside of the leg is and the hip sockets themselves, in how they receive the weight of the legs here. It's a lot. Legs are heavy and they're pulling down. The other thing is the whole lower limbs from leg to knee to foot is heavy, and it probably has pulled you into a little bit of an arch. Very few of us will naturally move ourselves into a neutral pelvis, and we'll even have a hard time doing that effectively in this position. Go ahead and roll the soles of the feet back onto the floor. So remember where you landed in happy baby pose, how that felt. And because we're going to come back to that in a minute, but we're going to deal with the support for this bound angle pose that we just did, unsupported. So grab your blocks. Hopefully they're not too far away. You can roll to your side. Try not to sit up all the way, because we did all this work to release the spine. So stay laying down if possible. Find a way to get your blocks. Bring them mat width distance apart up on their medium height. And then you're gonna bring the soles of the feet together to touch. Tip the blocks in so that top surface of the block is gonna rest against mid thigh and calf, the outer edge of it, and try to have that at the same level on both legs so they're open equally. And then we're gonna really try to orient our tailbone right into center, the heels right into center. So we're really establishing that midline and then building the length of the spine on top of it. And then work towards finding some neutral pelvis here. So we've got that release in the hip joints, soften on the inner thighs, soften in the curve of the hips where they wrap around underneath you, where the thighs come in to meet the pelvis. And then really try to find a neutral pelvis in this position and notice if that's hard, easy, natural, easier, right? Just tuning in to where you're landing here. Good. All right. And then just take 2 nice deep breaths and try to be nice and long and released through the waist, the ribs, the shoulders. Maybe even if your towel roll's handy, grabbing a hold of your towel roll and placing it underneath the head to experiment again with that little support at the base of the skull, to notice if that helps you drop your ribs into a more neutral position here and have an easier access to neutral pelvis. Thank goodness. There we go. And we're just going to close our eyes in this shape and breathe for 3 nice deep breaths. And so now let your breath be the flow part of this flow class. Inhale. As you exhale, soften into the belly. Remember, we've got to release the abs down and in order for our pelvic floor to naturally get involved, in order for the low belly to lift up, for the sides of the waist to engage, and for the ribs to soften enough for the belly to lift up and underneath them. 2 more breaths, just like that. Nice, easy inhale. Good. And then we're going to take the blocks out from underneath us, bring the soles of the feet back onto the floor, nice and flat. We're just going to have 1 breath, working on feeling that swoop up and under the ribs again. Inhale. Exhale. Scoop the belly up and under the ribs. And see if you can feel it lift all the way. Good. So maybe that whole exercise actually helped you get a little bit more connectivity because you found some release in the hips and now your head's supported and your ribs aren't fighting it. We'll see. It'll be really different for all of us. And for some of us, this work is too subtle body, and we're still in the phase where we're using our whole selves to do everything and lots of big postural muscles. And so we can't necessarily feel those fine muscles, and that's okay too. So if you're at a place where you're like, no, I'm really just not feeling very much difference in what's going on, then don't worry about it. I'll kind of arrive on this journey of feeling into center, finding midline, finding core engagement to support our body in different stages and in different ways because of the various things we have going on. It's a very individual process. So trust the process. That's really where we want to come from. So bring your feet so they're hip width distance apart. To support our coming up into a bridge here with really the right engagement on the inner thighs and not relying on these outer thigh muscles, which we will default to because that's our postural center of strength for most of us. Go ahead and take your block on its tall, wide setting in between thighs. Just give a little gentle squeeze in, not so much that the block would be losing air if it was a balloon or changing shape, just enough to hold it there. And then the arms come down by the sides, glide the shoulders down the back underneath you, and begin to articulate the tailbone up on an exhale. Don't be in a rush. Remember how when we rolled up through the spine, we really did it with the breath, and we use the abs to lift rather than the back muscles. The same thing here. We want the abs to sweep along the spine to help leverage the hips up rather than leveraging from the back. Squeeze the block a little bit more if you need to keep the inner thigh engagement, and then slide your towel underneath you. So it's really low on the hips, as low as you can go without falling off of it, but just have it just above your sits bones and tail, basically, is an ideal space. Now we come back to that investigation of happy baby pose. But before we do, we really want to lengthen the spine underneath us. So like you're a hammock hung from one point, drape everything down into the ground. So make sure you're not holding tension in the ribs up above. You're not holding tension in the hips or the low back. You're really letting that sweep and hang long. And you're just going to drop your right knee into your chest. There's a little release to begin here. And lengthen your left leg out. Good. Maybe releasing that left heel down to the floor. But just notice if that draws you into an arch and that's uncomfortable, or if your hips swing out of alignment and that's uncomfortable, maybe float the heel up and keep the hips level and find the stretch there. Find where you're comfortable working, and then switch. It's going to be not exactly neutral pelvis here, right? Because you're using the legs unevenly, and that's fine. Neutral pelvis is not the place we're going to live all the time, because we have dynamic movement that we want to do. That's the whole point. But we want to have neutral pelvis as the baseline that we can easily return to, which creates resiliency in the body. So have that home base. So the body always realigns itself after it finishes each dynamic movement. So when you're done with this stretch out on the right side, come back into center with the knees and level off the hips. And if it helps you, it probably will, to place the feet down, level the hips off. Notice if you feel anything radiating. Could be a clue that you're not balanced on that side. Find that neutral pelvis. Now, let's talk about neutral pelvis in this position, because we're tilted, right? So the pubic bone is going to be higher than the belly button, but we want to find your two hip bones directly across from each other still, so you don't have one lifted up to your shoulder and the other dropping down towards the heel. And you can assist that by making sure the towel's level underneath you. And you don't want to be rocked down into the tail so you're in an arch with the ribs popped open. And you don't want to be in a tuck where that belly button's super low and the pubic bone's super high. You want to be in a nice cascade, right? So that there's a even slope level on this tilt, as it were. All right. Now, lift the feet off the floor and then drop the knees in towards the chest. And notice how different this is than doing happy baby pose or coming into happy baby pose from laying flat on the ground. All of a sudden, your shoulders and ribs can really lengthen out onto the floor. So if you're finding some adjustments happening, let them happen. move around, so you get extra space in between the ribs, extra release and length in the shoulders, extra wide, right? And then bring the soles of the feet up and then see where you land on the leg. And if you can find soft arms here, soft hips, soft shoulders, and just breathe into this shape. These elevated hips is a totally different place to come into happy baby pose from. And for a lot of us is way more successful. And then we can stretch one leg out to the side. And then the other leg out to the side. A little bit far back here in the corner to find side to side range for me. But hopefully you've got easy side to side range here and not a ball basket like I do. Good. And you can reach both legs out to the side if you want to stretch the inner thighs equally. Then bend the knees and come back into center. And then we do what we call walking the legs. So you just reach one leg out and then the other as you drop the opposite knee into the chest, so that you get the legs and the attachments going back in their parallel lines, and then drop the feet down here. Feel free to adjust the towel underneath you. We got a lot of length and connectivity. So I'm going to come forward, so I'm not quite so back in the corner for this next bit. You can probably see where you are. But feel free at any point to make some adjustments if you need to. From here, we're going to try to see if we can engage the pelvic floor a little bit more easily than we would be able to if we were laying flat on the back. We've done a lot of prep to get here. So just take an inhale and then exhale, soften the belly down towards the base of the spine. Feel that point at which hopefully your pelvic floor kind of naturally lifts up and in. And then the low abdominals lift, and then the sides of the waist. And then it comes up and under the ribs, and the ribs close on top of it. And hold it there at the base of the inhale or base of the exhale for 3, 2, 1. And we'll take 2 more nice deep breaths. Exhale, soften the belly into center as you release the breath, and see if you can feel the pelvic floor getting involved, scooping up and under along the sides of the waist with the ribs closing on top of it. Hold at the base of your exhale for 3, 2, 1, building that connectivity. And 1 more here, just in this space. And exhale, soften. Belly into center. Feel the point at which your pelvic floor and low abdominals turn on, and let them lift naturally as the air keeps flowing out. There's room for them to come back into the body, sides of the waist, scoops all the way up and under the diaphragm, ribs soften on top, and hold for 3, 2, 1. Beautiful. Now you're going to grab a hold of your block again on its wide, tall setting. Place it in between the thighs and give a light squeeze, that 30% engagement. Same time, begin to think about the second and third toe joint and lining your knee up with it. It's probably pretty lined up because we have that block really bringing us into hip width distance apart and helping us with that inner line engagement. Hands to the hip bones, make sure they're directly across from each other. All that alignment stuff makes a big difference when you're trying to engage evenly through center. Take an inhale here. Exhale, gentle squeeze into the block as you soften the belly down and in, and then see if you can engage the pelvic floor like you're pulling that block up into the abdomen with your abdominals. And find that scoop. Close the ribs and hold for 3, 2, 1. 1 more breath here. And exhale. Little squeeze into the blocks. Really orient between that second and third toe joint. Feel the inner lift of the thighs, the pelvic floor, the low belly, the waist, the diaphragm. Close the ribs. 3, 2, 1. We'll go ahead and take the block out, but imagine it's still there. Orient between your second and third toe joint. Here comes the Pilates. Be aware. Keep the ribs soft. Keep your hips in neutral. Inhale. Exhale. Soften the low belly. Really anchor through the left foot on that second and third toe joint. As you roll through the right foot, orient the transfer of weight, the release of the foot through the second and third toe joint to float the knee up to center so that knee stays oriented in the center of the hip. And then that supporting leg is really where we're bringing our focus into the second and third toe joint. Feel that femur head land right into center. Feel everything that relax around it, but draw up through your abs. And your ab connection should be so much more here than it was just breathing and laying flat with this right knee in the air. The knee lands right over the hip, shin towards the ceiling and tabletop. Right, that's a lot of explanation. Let's see what you can do. As you come back down to the floor, you're paying attention that you're tracking that left knee still in between the second and third toe joint. And as you're placing the right foot down, it's coming into the second and third toe joint with the weight, getting ready to anchor on the right side. As you exhale, roll through the left, second and third toe joint, anchor through the right, feel the inner thigh connection, and then float your shin up. Really feel pelvic floor engaging inside of the waist, right inside of the hip bone, ribs. Land. 3, 2, 1. Inhale. Come down. Don't lose your connectivity on the way down. Keep orienting. Second and third toe joint on the supporting side, and then transfer the weight when that left foot comes down into the second and third toe joint as you place your foot. Seems super specific, but I will guarantee none of us are landing there. We're all either inside or outside of the foot. And then we're not tracking that the whole length of this exercise either. And we really should be trying to develop that as our native habitat, though you really feel strongly when we move off of it, as opposed to it having to be kind of a amorphous space, right? We'll do one more time each side. Try to be patient with this detail-oriented work. I know it's a lot of focus. Exhale, roll through the right foot to transfer the weight out. Feeling that second and third toe joint, really anchoring through the second, third toe joint on the left side. Feeling that move all the way up into the hip attachments. Core is on. Maybe you can give a little extra squeeze, but make sure you're not leveraging from the back to lift the foot. It's all abdominal, so the leg just floats up. Inhale, bring the foot down. Find the second and third toe joint as you land. Exhale, roll through the left, second and third toe joint. Land up at the top. And then you're going to keep this left leg up at the top. Inhale, exhale, roll through the second and third toe joint to bring the right foot up to join. Beautiful. And then you're going to imagine you've got a table that's laying on its side that you can push your feet against. You're going to take a block in between the knees, squeeze into it a little bit here. Inhale. And that's on that tall white setting. And then exhale. Push that imaginary table away from you with both feet. Just an inch. Pause. Inhale. Maybe 2 inches. And then exhale, scoop the belly, lift the pelvic floor, draw the knees back to over the hips. Very small movement, very core supported, focused, using the pelvic floor. 2 more. Exhale to press away. just to where you can stay scooped and engaged, and ideally out of the hip flexors, right? Inhale, exhale, scoop, and come back. One more here. Exhale. Inhale, pause. Exhale, scoop. And come back. And then just draw the knees into the chest and come into a little side to side rock. I just look at the clock and we're 10 minutes past. Is that possible? I've just been teaching ad nauseum. All right, I'll come up. Thank you for hanging out with it. Susan, you still there? Yes. I'm gonna come over and give us a pause.